By the late 1960s, the Royal Australian Air Force was staring at a replacement problem it could see coming a decade out. Their Mirage IIIs had only settled into squadron service in the mid-60s, and they were fine airplanes. But fighter technology was moving so fast that the planners in Canberra figured the Mirage would be finished as a frontline fighter by 1980. And Australia's air defense problem is about as ugly as they come. Because you are guarding a continent with two oceans on either side, a small force to do it with, and the nearest serious help sitting half a world away. Whatever replaced the Mirage needed speed, reach, and the ability to handle more than one job. So the shopping started early. Two candidates stood out from the pack. The first was the Dassault Mirage F1, which was just entering prototype testing in France. The second was a radical double delta out of Sweden with canards up on its shoulders, an airplane the whole fighter world was watching, called the Saab Viggen. The Mirage F1 was easy for Canberra to size up, since it came from the same French house that built the Mirage III they already flew. But the Viggen took some explaining, because Saab built it to solve a Swedish problem, which was how you keep an air force alive after the enemy craters your main bases in the first hour of a war. Their answer was an airplane that could operate off 500-meter stretches of ordinary highway. The canards up front gave it the lift to get airborne short, and the engine out back was a Volvo RM8, a license-built version of the Pratt Whitney JT8D airliner turbofan with a Swedish afterburner and a thrust reverser added on, so the airplane could slam down onto a road strip and stop like a Navy jet catching a wire, then run out to Mach 2 once it was back upstairs. And the finished article was the most advanced fighter in Europe when it arrived. A title it would hold until the Panavia tornado showed up a decade later. The prototype had flown back in February 1967, so by the time anybody overseas came asking, Saab had real iron in the air to show them. Saab named it for the Thunderbolt, though the same word in Swedish also means a tufted duck, and the airplane has carried both nicknames ever since. None of that was designed with Australia in mind, but a fighter that could work off short rough strips, get turned around in minutes by a handful of conscripts, and look after itself a long way from a main base, rid awfully well in a country where the distances are brutal and the airfields across the empty north are few and far between. So in January 1970, the Australian government formally asked Saab for information on the JA-37. The dedicated fighter version that was still in development as the eventual replacement for Sweden's own Drakens. Stockholm had to bless the idea of exporting frontline hardware first, which was a bigger hurdle than it sounds, because neutral Sweden kept a famously tight grip on where its weapons ended up. But the blessing came through, and by December of that year, classified Viggen documents were sitting in Australian hands. There was a catch, though, because the Viggens actually rolling off the line were AJ-37s, built for attack first with fighting a distant second, and the Royal Australian Air Force needed a genuine multi-role fighter. So the Australians wrote up their own requirements for what an Aussie Viggen would have to be, sent them to Saab at the end of 1971, and in March 1972, the company came back with a proposal called the Saab 37AU. The 37AU was the hottest Viggen anybody ever put on paper. The interceptor mission demanded more speed than the attack birds could deliver, so Saab reached clean across the Atlantic and worked with Grumman on a new intake design to find it. The Australians wanted a fixed cannon in the airframe instead of the Aden gun pods the AJ-37 hauled around, and I suspect that push helped nudge the Swedes toward the monster 30mm Oerlikon they eventually built into the JA-37. The airplane needed longer legs too, and the full-scale mock-up Saab built showed a retractable aerial refueling probe on the nose, a slimmer reshaped radome, and the serial A21-2 painted on the tail, because the Royal Australian Air Force had already reserved the designation A21 for the type. The centerpiece, though, was long-range interception. The JA-37 was already slated for the Ericsson PS-46 pulse Doppler radar and British Skyflash missiles, an improved Sparrow, but the 37AU mock-up went a whole step further, because hanging off its pylons were AIM-54 Phoenix missiles. The Phoenix was the huge fleet defense weapon the U.S. Navy developed to kill Soviet bombers 100 miles out before they ever got a shot at a carrier group. And only one airplane ever carried it operationally, the F-14 Tomcat. For a country whose entire defense problem is empty ocean in every direction, that kind of reach made all the sense in the world, and Grumman's fingerprints keep turning up in this story anyway, since the JA-37 would end up sharing some of the same digital flight system hardware as the Tomcat. The catch was money, because making the Phoenix worth carrying meant a serious radar upgrade. And serious radar upgrades come with serious invoices. Though if you want strange, the British later studied hanging Phoenix missiles on Vulcan bombers to make long-range interceptors, so by that standard, a Phoenix Viggen was downright sensible. The courtship turned into hard numbers in May 1973, when Saab put formal offers on the table for 27, 67, or 127 aircraft, with the fleet in service by 1976. And the deal came wrapped in jobs, because depending on how many airplanes Australia bought, components and possibly most of the aircraft themselves would be built in Australia, along with licensed production of engines, spares, and electronics. The government aircraft factories plant in Melbourne had been building airplanes since the Second World War and had turned out the RAAF's own Mirages under license, so everybody involved knew local fighter production could be done. But that Mirage work was winding down, and without a new program, the place faced going quiet. A fighter that kept the lights on in Melbourne was worth real votes, and everybody at the table knew it. An offer that sweet still had to survive due process, though, so the RAF sent an evaluation team out to survey the field, and the field was the Viggen, the Mirage F1, the McDonnell Douglas F-15, and the Northrop YF-17 Cobra. The timing of that survey mattered because the F-15 was brand new, and the YF-16 and YF-17 were flying head-to-head in the Pentagon's lightweight fighter competition at that very moment, which meant the field was about to get better all on its own. The recommendation that team brought home was the one every salesman dreads, which was to wait and see what shook out. In 1974, Canberra agreed, pushed the Mirage replacement out into the 1980s, and set the program to restart in 1976. Australian politics then went through the ringer, because the Governor-General sacked the Whitlam government at the end of 1975, so when the program did restart, there was a new government in Canberra looking at the books with fresh eyes. They told Saab that a bespoke Australian Viggen no longer penciled out, since the engineering bill for a one-country custom bird would land on 100 airframes at best, and asked instead what a standard JA-37 would run, which kept Saab in the hunt with the stock airplane. That was the end of the 37 AU, right there on the spot, reduced to a mock-up and a stack of paperwork. And the field the new government was looking at had shifted under everybody's feet while Australia waited, because Dassault now had the Mirage 2000 coming. And worse for Saab, in 1975 the F-16 had swept the so-called sale of the century, beating the Mirage F1 and Saab's own export entry, a Viggen variant called the 37E, for an order of 348 airplanes across Belgium, Denmark, the Netherlands, and Norway. And the YF-17 had grown into the FA-18 Hornet because the U.S. Navy had picked up the losing fly-off design, put McDonnell Douglas in the lead alongside Northrop, and rebuilt it into a twin-engine carrier fighter made for life over water. Against airplanes with production lines ramping up and half the Western world signing on, a Swedish fighter with a single customer was a brutal case to make on cost, on spares, on upgrades, on everything that matters across a 30-year service life. By late 1979, the shortlist was down to the F-16 and the Hornet, and for a country that does its fighting over empty ocean, the twin-engine Navy jet let the map do the arguing. In October 1981, Australia announced it was buying 75 Hornets, and the Mirages soldiered on until the late 80s, waiting for them. Australia turned out to be the high watermark of the Viggen's entire export story, because the airplane never won an export order anywhere, and every campaign it flew came home empty. When the line finally closed in 1990, Sweden had built 329 of them, and had flown every last one itself. Part of that was Swedish neutrality, which made arms deals politically sticky at both ends of the transaction, Part of it was that American engine core, because Washington held a veto over anything with U.S. technology inside. And in 1978, Washington used it to kill a Viggen sale to India by refusing the export license for the engine, which sent India off to buy Jaguars instead. And part of it was plain timing, because the Viggen came of age at the exact moment the F-16 showed up with the whole Western alliance behind it. There are two little codas here that sting. The Melbourne factory that needed the Viggen work ended up assembling Australia's Hornets instead, and the A-21 serials the RAAF had set aside for its Viggens got painted on those Hornets. The 37AU would have been the ultimate Viggen, a Phoenix-hauling, probe-equipped, cannon-armed interceptor working the empty water off the top end of Australia, and I would have loved to see it fly. Saab promised the Aussies a Thunderbolt, and they came within one decision of owning the best armed duck in aviation history. So that's it for today's video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. It goes a long way for us.